Thank you. Welcome back to the next session of causes of market failure. Just to recap what we did with the previous session, that Eselsbrug that I gave you, which is military. At the first one there, the M, merit and demerit goods. We look at imperfect competition as one of the causes of market failure, lack of information, immobility of the factors of production, unequal distribution of income and wealth. We looked at externalities, and the last one was price discrimination. Right. Now, just let's look at the effects of market failure. Just get here. The effects, where is it now? Effects of market failure. First of all, we are going to look at government intervention. Yeah, we're looking at government intervention. We're looking at inefficiencies. Let's start there with inefficiencies. This is your effects of market failure, inefficiencies. And remember now, when we look at your inefficiencies, yeah, we look at productive inefficiency, and we are looking at allocative inefficiency. In a question paper, it may be asked that you need to distinguish between productive inefficiency and allocative inefficiency. Now, as you've already heard, in terms of cost, it means that the business does not produce goods at the lowest production cost or possible cost. When you look at your productive inefficiency, businesses do not produce at the lowest possible cost. Right. And then when you look at your allocative inefficiency, let me just slide it up there. Allocative inefficiency is product mix does not reflect, your consumers' tastes. Resources are not allocated. Right. As I've said, this, I don't know, sometimes we do not know how examiners will ask this question, but I always look at distinguish. So this can possibly be an 8-mark question where you look at where you should distinguish between productive and allocative efficiency. Remember now, one of the effects of market failure is also that externalities. The externalities is once again part of your effects of market failure. And there you look at negative externalities. Once again, negative externalities, where you also need to discuss or explain what is a negative externality, what is negative externalities, where we say that the cost incurred by the consumer and not the producer. But remember now, they may also ask you to illustrate by means of a graph the effects of negative externalities. externalities, the effects of negative externalities. I always advise my learners that when they draw a graph, let it be a fully labeled graph. For those of us who use Enjoy Economics, on page 117, you will get that graph. And just for those of us who do not have it, let's just look into that graph there. Let's just look into that graph. This is your costs. This is the quantity which is produced there. And then we look at your supply curve. Remember now, supply curve. And we have our demand curve there. Remember now, when you look at your progression in grade 12, with the progression in grade 12, they may ask you to describe the demand curve and the supply curve, where we say the demand curve slopes downwards from left to right, and we say the supply curve slopes upward from left to right, and then right, that is that. This is just an explanation there. We do have a question here. Where does price discrimination comes from? Where does price discrimination comes from within your negative or within the causes for market failure? Right. Let's just get back to that question there. Where does price discrimination comes from? I'll deal with that now. I'm just waiting for my... When you consult your question paper that is now for your February, March 2013, all of us, when you look at your 2013 paper there, the February, March 2013, price discrimination is one of the causes for market failure. A situation in which your identical goods and services are sold at different prices to different consumers. In your Enjoy Economics, we only have 7, right? But the memorandum also allows for price discrimination as one of the causes for market failure. So if you can lay your hand on the memorandum of 2013, February, March 2013, you will see that price discrimination is included as one of the causes for market failure. I hope that one answers the question there. Where does price discrimination come from? Thank you for that question. But remember, your memorandum is all inclusive. So some of the examiners also make use of other sources in answering a question if it is a 50-mark question. Right. So I don't think that you will have a problem if you include within your 6-mark question where they ask you to list causes for market failure, if you include price discrimination, that it will also be accepted because it has been taken up in one of the memorandums for external question paper. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. Let's just go further with the graphs that we are dealing with. We're dealing with negative externalities. In the first graph here, this is just an explanation of how your demand and supply curve looks like. Right. I'm going further here. This is your costs. This is your quantity. This is your quantity. We have our demand curve here. And we have our supply curve. Right. We have our supply curve. Now, remember now, where demand and supply intersects, that is now your original demand curve and supply curve. This is actually information that you do have or that comes from you from grade 10. Right. Where we have that intersection, we have or interaction there between demand and supply, or intersects demand and supply, intersects, we have equilibrium there. We have equilibrium there. Now, remember with negative externalities, as you can still remember, I'm just getting back to our negative externalities notes here, where we say that use or consumers use a lot, right, that is now your demerit goods as well. Your consumers is unaware of the negative externalities or cost involved in using demerit goods. We say also that it is over consumed and it increases the health cost. Right. Let me just get back to the one on negative externalities as well. That was now on merit and demerit goods. Right. Externalities or your negative costs incurred by the consumer and not by the producer. For example, your pollution. Right. Let's get back to the graph. Yeah. We say on page 117 in Enjoy, for those of us who use Enjoy, this figure shows that the market equilibrium is at the situation here at point E, where demand and supply intersect. Right. So at point E, the price or the equilibrium price will be P and equilibrium quantity will be Q. This represents the private cost. Remember now, in a data response question, they may ask you to indicate the how can I put it now? The private cost, right? The private cost will be OP and OQ. However, if it were possible, remember now we're looking at negative externalities, and we all know what negative externalities are. These are the things like your pollution, tobacco smoking, and alcohol abuse. If it was possible to calculate the external cost, these could be added to the private cost. And if the consumers were required to pay the full cost of production, a different equilibrium will prevail. But remember now, your supply curve will shift to the left. Your supply curve will shift to the left, which will be S1. This is now, give a reason why S shift to S1. Give a possible reason. This may be a question. Give a possible reason why S shift to S1. It is that if it is required of the consumers to pay the production cost, then the S will shift to S1, which means now you can see that there is new equilibrium formed at point D. I'm just making here point D, right? But what you also see is that there is a price increase from P to P1. From P to P1. There's a price increase from P to P1. And what you also can see is that the output has decreased from Q to Q1. So now, so they may ask you within data response to give or to explain what will happen if the supply curve shift to the left or supply shift. They give it to you what happened with the price and what happened with the quantity. Response will be your price has increased from P to P1 and your supply has decreased from Q to Q1. And we say the following, that a freely operating market may lead to lower prices and higher outputs of goods that have harmful social consequences. So now government should actually try to how can I put it now, to lessen the negative externalities, right? So that this situation which prevail here can be changed, right? So that this situation can change. So that the consumer at the end of the day pay lower prices and then the output is more. Right. Then, with your positive externalities also contained within a graph. Positive externalities also contained within a graph. Let me just get my bearings here. Positive externalities. Right. Graph on page 118 for those of us who are using the Enjoy. Just see the difference now here. Also the same axes where we have the price and where we have quantity. Price and quantity. Once again, we have our demand curve. We have our supply curve. But remember now, what do we say is your positive externalities? Benefits that befalls the consumer and not the producer. Or benefits that is gained by the consumer and not the producer. Now, if your demand increase, remember now, this is the situation which is now prevailing, where we have, once again, the equilibrium at point E here, we have equilibrium price at P, and then where we have then also quantity at Q1. What should happen with positive externalities is that the demand for positive externalities, this is why externalities is one of the reasons for market failure, or one of the causes for market failure. And we say that there are too little produced for the consumer, or the production does not reflect the needs of the consumer. So, what should now actually happen is that your demand should now actually increase, or demand should shift from D to D1. Right, from D to D1. What will happen now? Supply stays the same. When you look at your grade 10 work, when supply stays the same and demand increases, price will increase from P to P1. Price will increase from P to P1. But what has now been established is that the output has increased from Q to Q1. Output has increased from Q to Q1. Right. When you look at your positive externalities, and we take away the demand curve which has shifted, right? Because this is where we want to be. But now we say that the free market has actually failed because they produce less than required of a socially useful goods. Now, any question can be asked here. For instance, define, and this is now just as part of a data response question. Define externalities. Right. And we say that externalities convert your private cost and benefits into social cost and benefits. Right. Convert private costs and benefits, into social costs and benefits, and it is also known as spillover effects. Also known as spillover effects. And then they can ask any question with regards to your interpretation of the graph which is depicted there. What will happen, for instance, if D shifts to D1? Price will increase from P to P1, and or quantity will increase from Q to Q1. Right. Now, government intervention with regards to, still busy with the effects of market failure, and we look at government intervention. Looking at government intervention, let's get the focus there. Government intervention. Right. Now, when government intervene, this is now the effects of market failure. Because we had market failure, so what should happen now in the event of market failure? We say that government should intervene. How should government intervene? What should government do? Remember now, when we look at there was a misallocation of resources. So, if government intervene now, government should prevent the misallocation of resources. Government should now prevent the misallocation of resources. Right. Now, or prevent misallocation of resources. The allocative function of government stems from the fact that market failures distort the allocation of resources in an economy and result in less than optimal production. Right. So that's why it is important that that government should prevent the misallocation of resources. We're looking also at incomplete markets. We're looking at incomplete markets here. For those of us using Enjoy, markets failures due to incomplete markets are particularly important sources of allocative distortions, and there are two manifestations of incomplete markets. Right. We look at community goods and services, and we look at collective goods and services. Very important here. Distinguish between community goods and services. That is the distortions that is taking place on your incomplete market. Community goods and services. Right. And also your collective goods and services. Also very popular question here. Goods and services, where you need to distinguish between your community goods and services and collective goods and services. They have the characteristics, this is now your community goods and services, have the characteristics that prevent competitive markets from supplying them efficiently. Such market failures can take various forms. In the case of public goods, this is now your public goods, this was now your defense, police services, street lighting and flood control. Potential consumers have no way to reveal their demand. And this makes it impossible to determine a price or to force users to pay for the benefits they derive from using these goods and services. Looking into collective goods and services, have some of the characteristics of public goods. Consumers would either not reveal their demand for such goods and services, or producers would find it impossible to enforce payment of the price. Such goods can be supplied by the competitive marketers, but neither the quantity supplied nor the price resulting from market provision would be optimal. And then when you look at in grade 10, when we look at the circular flow, when you look at the circular flow, we say that government is providing public goods and services. And when you look at your community goods and also that collective goods and services, remember those resort also underneath that public goods and services, which is also rendered by the government or the state, another term for government. Right. Now, government intervention with regards to externalities. Government intervention with regards to externalities. Remember, externalities, one of the causes of market failures. Right. But we say that government should intervene, rectifying the market failure. So government should intervene with regards to, remember now, we should discourage now the negative externalities, and we should encourage the positive externalities. With regards to negative, how can government intervene in decreasing negative externalities? Now, this is, let me put it here, negative, and let me put here positive externalities in table form. Positive externalities. Right. So, we say that government can persuade, right? Can make use of persuasion to decrease negative externalities. Right? Government can also use the price mechanism in decreasing negative externalities. I wonder if some of you can give me an example there of how government use the price mechanism, and then also through direct controls. Right, through direct controls. Also a very popular question here where they ask you, how do government decrease, for instance, negative, or how can government decrease negative externalities, right? This is that 6-mark question where you just need to list it, but it can also be an 8-mark question in where you need to name and discuss ways in which government can decrease negative externalities, right? When we look at positive externalities, government can also make use of your price mechanism here in increasing your positive externalities. They can also make use of direct controls, and also through persuasion. Right, this is now, and if you can see here, it's basically the same thing here: price discrimination, direct controls. Right, so in your preparation or when you do your revision now, look at how government can intervene in decreasing negative externalities, increasing your positive externalities. It's through price mechanism, it is through direct controls, and it is through persuasion. Right. Then improving your income distribution, also government intervention, improving income distribution. And when we look at improving income distribution, there's many ways in which government can alleviate or improve the income distribution. We look at your traditional methods, in improving income distribution relate to the levying of various kinds of taxes and the provision of free services in kind, and cash benefits to the poor. Your traditional, that is now your taxes, right? Free services, and then the last one there was services in kind to the poor. Right. This is now our traditional methods in improving income distribution. One of the questions that also may arise from this one here is what type of tax system is used within South Africa, and this is also with improving income distribution, and we look at your progressive tax system. Those who earn more will pay more taxes. Those who earn less will pay less taxes. Right. That is the progressive. And then when we look at your redress methods, also with regards to income distribution, we look at the redress methods. I'm just out of focus there. The redress methods. Right. Redress methods, right, is your RDP. Right. We also look into the BEE. Or the other one is broad-based black economic empowerment, right, including your other groups ethnicity groups within South Africa, also part of the redress methods in getting your market failure, or to address or to change the market failure. Right. Also, what government do is looking at maximum wages. Maximum wages. Maximum wages, remember, it may be asked of you to discuss fully government intervention or the effects of market failure. How can government turn around the effects of market failure? And one of the ways in which government can do that is through maximum wages. Also within a graph on page 122 of that enjoy economics. For those of us who don't have it, I'm just redrawing that graph here, and then we're looking into the explanation of that graph. This is your wage, right? And we'll look also into the quantity of labor employed, quantity of labor employed, right? There's now just a Q2, Q, and Q1, and then we have wage and wage 1, right? What this implies here, what this graph implies here, is the following. If government enforce the minimum wage law, the minimum wage laws, what will happen? I'm making a question mark there, I'm putting a question mark there, and we see what will happen. In the absence of government intervention in the market, wages would be at this level. This is now, when you look at W, absence of government intervention, wages will be at W, right? Will be at W, and the quantity for labor, and this is just, you can just read it from there, quantity for labor this is for labor will be at Q, right? This is at that point over there. Quantity for labor will be at Q. If, now, look at the graph here, if minimum wage is set above W, for instance, at this level, right? If minimum wage is set above W, the quantity demanded for labor, right? Quantity demanded for labor will fall from Q, and this is now what you can see. I just want to explain it to you now. If wages is set at above W, quantity demanded, can we all see that? Quantity demanded will fall from Q to Q1, right? And supply will increase from Q to Q2. And this is actually how the enforcement of the minimum wage law will work, right? We say that in the absence of government intervening there, wages will be at W, right? Wages will be at W, and the quantity of labor employed will be at Q. Now, if it happens that wages is set above W, which is W1, what can you see? Demand will shift, or demand will decrease from Q to Q1, and supply will increase from Q to Q2. Right, and that will form part of your discussion of maximum wages or minimum wages. Just rectify the minimum. Right, minimum wages. And then look at government intervention with regards to maximum prices, also within a graph. Maximum prices. Let me just get into there. Your maximum prices. Sorry. Now, also within a graph. This is the price. This is your quantity. Right, and then we also have demand, which is here, and we have supply, which is here. Sorry. Then we have price, the equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity, which is P and Q. Right. Now just look what happened now here. Going to insert here and we look at maximum prices. Looking at maximum prices here, looking at maximum prices here. Right, now, looking at this graph, which depicts now maximum prices, and this is now how government intervene in market failure, or the effects of market failure. Remember now, this market failure needs to be rectified. It is possible for a government to intervene in the market and set a maximum price. For example, on basic foodstuffs, housing, energy, in order to benefit the poor. In South Africa, paraffin, which is almost exclusively used by the poor people, has a maximum fixed price. And the price is nevertheless regularly. Right, now, just look what will happen now. This is now what prevails within the market. We have where demand and supply. Remember now, this is our market forces. Demand and supply. Now, if where demand and supply intersects, we have our market price. Right. Remember now, your price discrimination was one of your causes for market failure. So government needs to set price. And remember, here we look at your public goods and your collective goods, right? Things that it will be unable, or consumers will be unable to attain if it was at market prices, right? Now, that will be then at a quantity of Q or OQ and a quantity of OP. Now, this figure shows now the following: that the market price equilibrium is at P and your equilibrium quantity is at Q. Right. Now, if there is now with your maximum prices, government intervene and passes a law that suppliers may not charge more than P1. Right. Suppliers may not charge more than P1. And there is P1 now included. If we look at now what will happen now, remember now, in a free market system, your suppliers will supply at the highest price possible. Now just see what is happening now here, that the quantity supplied here, the quantity supplied, when government has now put a maximum price there at a price level of P1, see what happens now, Q, or the supply, decrease from Q to Q1. And as we all know, our consumers, at the lowest possible price, what will happen to demand? Demand increase from Q to Q2. Right. And this needs, if this now needs to be a discussion, right? Maybe they can ask you for an 8-mark question to draw how government intervene with regards to maximum prices, and this is how this labeled graph will look like. An explanation will be where we look at market price at P and quantity at Q. Maximum prices at P1 will result in supply decrease from Q to Q1 and demand increase from Q to Q2. As simple as that. There's no problem. It's just interpreting what will happen with regards to maximum prices. Another way in which government can intervene, government intervention, is with regards to minimum prices. Let me just get my focus in here. Minimum prices minimum prices, and minimum prices also has your graph here, drawing the graph, labeled graph once again, which is your price, which is your quantity, right? And then we look at demand once again, supply once again. We all know what this depicts here, and now we have a minimum price of P1. What will happen at the minimum price of P1, and what will happen with quantity demanded and quantity supply. Q1, Q2, and here you will be able to tell what will happen. Remember now, here we all know, also out of your grade 10 syllabi, here we have a surplus, here we have a surplus, and if we have a surplus here, remember what will happen is your demand decrease from Q to Q1. Remember now there was a price increase from P to P1. Consumers not willing to pay, right? So the demand will decrease, and supply, because it's free market, your suppliers will give more because it is at a higher price. Therefore, quantity increase from Q to Q2, and quantity demanded, because it is at a higher price, it will decrease from Q to Q1. Right. Then also on subsidies, government intervene with regards to subsidies, also contained within a graph. Let me just throw it here, price and quantity. We have demand, we have supply, and it sounds so monotonous here, but remember now it's important that you label your graphs, There we also have then, once again, equilibrium quantity, equilibrium price. Right. Now, remember now, when government gives a subsidy, what happened is the following. This is where supply now is. Now, the price, government wants the situation where more is produced, so he will give a subsidy, right? So what will happen? My supply will increase or shift to S1. Supply will shift from S to S1, right? Supply will shift, and then when we have this graph here, just bear with me here, I'm just trying to lead you within this graph. It may be very confusing, but it's actually not that confusing. Right? There's my supply, and then supply is also here. Right? You see, the moment your supply increase, we see that there is a price, this is most now at P, there is a price drop to P2, P1, actually, P1, and then there was a price at P2. But now, what happened now, if subsidies are given by government to supply more or to produce more, your supply will increase, which means the following, right? The illustration given here, lowering the cost of production in this way causes a shift of the supply curve from S to S1. The result is a decrease in the market price from P to P1, and an increase in the equilibrium quantity from Q. This is most now, this was Q, from Q to Q1. And remember now, that is how government intervene in alleviating or changing the effects of market failure within subsidies on good. Right. And then also, grade 12, we all know the macroeconomic objectives, right? Macroeconomic objectives, and then government should also enhance macroeconomic enhance macroeconomic stability. Right, contained within the 5 macroeconomic objectives, we look at your stability, price stability, exchange rate stability. We're looking here at your demand side. How can government look at the demand side in obtaining macroeconomic stability? The belief, and remember now, when we discuss, there are 2 approaches with regards to the economy. We have the Keynesian approach and we have the monetarist approach, right? One of them believe that government should intervene, one of them believe that government should not intervene. Now, government intervention is the belief of the Keynesians, right? Belief of Keynesians where government needs to intervene, right? Belief of Keynesians, and that is now by the Keynesian thought or school of thought. They believe that economic stability is best achieved by intervening with appropriate macroeconomic policies, and the most important of these policies are your monetary and fiscal policies. Monetary and fiscal policies pertaining, or this is now your macroeconomic stability. To achieve macroeconomic stability, Keynesians believe that government should use your fiscal policy and your monetary policy to achieve that. And then also your supply side here. Supply side. Sometimes the macroeconomic objectives are not met because of market rigidities. 2 such rigidities may be the lack of information and the immobility of factors of production. Right. When you look at your lack of information, right, and this is now it's rigid because at some point government cannot actually, if government do not apply itself to getting to this point here, then it will still be a problem. Lack of information, there's very little government can do with regards to lack of information. Maybe through laws, government can make it possible for information to be distributed more frequently or more freely. And then government, if we look at the immobility of the factors of production, immobility of factors of production, government should also intervene in getting this problem addressed, right? And here, how can government look at the immobility of the factors of production? More investments in your infrastructure, more investments